Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad Air 1, the iPad Air first generation, and see how this particular iPad holds up in 2024. Now, I will definitely tell you, first of all, this iPad is 11 years old right now. There's really no reason why anybody should be using an 11-year-old iPad as of this point. But I will still tell you, there might be some reasons why you want to go and buy an iPad like this, and we'll talk about that throughout this video. But if you want to pick up some iPads, I would recommend buying this year. Links will be down in the description. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPad Air 1, this particular iPad has a 9.7-inch IPS LCD panel on the front of it. Now, the resolution of these particular, iPad displays were very, very high. It was a very good-looking panel. It was a very big panel, and at the time it was big, and it was a very high-resolution panel as well, which is very good because when you're buying an iPad like this, you're actually going to be getting an iPad that has a very, very decent and a very good display, which is something that's actually very, very nice. So personally for me, if I'm going to go ahead and buy some sort of iPad, I'm definitely going to want it to make sure that it has a pretty good display, and this one definitely had it for sure. It had a little bit of a panel gap though, which could have been a big turnoff for a lot of people, but I do think this was actually one of the first iPads I did end up kind of buying for myself. Before this, I didn't really buy an iPad, but I think this one may have been the first one I actually bought, and it was either between this or an iPad mini, and I think I ended up buying this one, and I think I did end up buying an iPad mini after. On the top and the bottom, you have your home button, and you have your, front camera, which is very, very big, massive amount of bezels on it compared to iPads nowadays. On the bottom you had your lightning port, which was nice. Thank goodness we didn't have some sort of 30-pin connector still sticking out from this thing. So we did have a lightning port, which is genuinely very cool. Very, very happy about that. And then you were getting your volume buttons on the side and the power button and everything like that. So nonetheless, on the outside, you were still getting a very good looking iPad. And on the back side, it was pretty much this flat back. You're getting your camera set up on the top left corner, which is very cool. And overall, I would definitely tell you on the outside, it definitely gets a thumbs up for me. It's a good looking iPad. There really isn't that much to complain about here, but some things that you are missing out on iPads nowadays that this one didn't have, things like the removal of the bezels. You don't have any Apple Pencil support at all. You don't really have that great of a cameras, which we'll talk about in a second. You're also not getting any cool little features like a ProMotion display or anything like that at all. And you're not getting software updates either, which is another major turnoff. If you're trying to go and get an iPad that's supported with software, or even buy an iPad in general, you should probably expect it to have some sort of software update. This one is not giving it to you. So that one is another one, big thing as well. Price tag wise is also another funny thing because these iPads are fairly cheap nowadays. These things do not cost that much money. And if you're going to go through and if you're going to buy some sort of an iPad, these things can be kind of deceiving because it could look like you're getting a pretty good deal on this thing. But the problem with this particular iPad is that, it just really isn't supported and it's not that good of an iPad. So you may look at it and you may think that this iPad is a very good deal or something, when in reality, in actuality, that's not really the case either. So just keep that in mind. And if I'm going to go and look at an iPad or whatever, I probably wouldn't recommend buying this one either, even if the price tag looks like it's an excellent price from that perspective. So keep that in mind. In terms of the camera, this thing is giving you that 5 megapixel camera on the backside, and it's giving you a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera. Now this camera is basically on par with something like an iPhone 6. So the same type of camera that you're getting either on an iPhone 5S or an iPhone 6 is essentially the same type of camera that you're getting on this thing. So that in and of itself is another very big thing. If you're wanting a good camera, this thing is not really going to be giving you that great of a camera from that perspective. So that can be kind of a problem for some people. So, here's the thing, right? If you want to kind of think about it the way sometimes I think about it, is I should think about it like this iPad even has a camera. So the fact that this thing has a camera that you can kind of use is good, and I actually do like that a lot. So that in and of itself is a pretty cool thing. Beyond that though, there's really no reason why I would recommend any single person buying this type of iPad, if I'm being honest. Even from a camera perspective, it just really isn't that great. So just keep that in mind. I would hate to recommend a phone to people if they're going to already have an outdated device, and that is kind of what's going on for this particular device as well. So from my perspective, this type of camera just really doesn't cut it. It just really isn't that great. If you want to look at it hey, this iPad has a camera that you can kind of use sometimes, then maybe. But if you have an iPhone 5S or newer, that camera is probably better. The camera that's in your pocket in your phone is better than this particular iPad. So once again, just kind of keep that in mind. From a software perspective, this is another somewhat interesting thing going on here. So this iPad basically went all the way up until iPadOS 12.5.6, and that was it. It is basically no longer getting any sort of software support, and that is somewhat the problem when you're getting a device like this. Like, this device is no longer really supported with software. Not only is it not supported with software, it has been unsupported with software pretty much since like 2018 or 2019. It has been a long time since this thing has given you a software update, and that is in and of itself another kind of problem. Like, why would you want to go and buy this phone if it's already outdated? And that is essentially what's going on with this particular device. So if I'm going to go ahead and have some sort of device, this thing is already kind of on its last leg of software, and I wouldn't really recommend people to buy this phone anymore, or buy this tablet anymore because of that. So once again, I don't want to, get into this like, where I'm just bashing this iPad over and over again. But the fact that it's no longer supported with software means that it's not really, a good idea to buy this iPad anymore. And that in and of itself, once again, is another big, massive thing to keep in mind. So that right there kind of covers it up from that perspective as well. Now, from a performance side, this particular iPad had that Apple A7 chip inside of it with 1GB of RAM. Now, I'm not really even 100% too sure how I can go and break this particular iPad down from a performance side, because it really isn't that great of a performing iPad. So what I'm going to kind of start with is basically saying like this, okay? This iPad, I remember when I used it back in like 2017 or 2016, it was something like that. I remember it being like a pretty good performing iPad. I was writing up some documents on it and it felt like it was like pretty good. And I didn't really have that much to complain about there from like a performance perspective on this iPad. The only issue I was really kind of getting was that this particular iPad was essentially giving me some really weird issues. I think it was like some like scrolling issue or something, but even that wasn't even that big of a deal. It was still a very good performing device. And at that time, I was very happy with it. But then we got the, Apple A8 chip, Apple A9 chip, and then about the A10 Fusion, that's when we started seeing big changes in my opinion. And the problem is nowadays, this is just not that great of a performing iPad. Why would you even think about buying an iPad like this when you can go and buy something that is going to be giving you a much better experience in almost every single way? And that is kind of the problem when you're buying some sort of iPad like this, right? When you're buying an iPad Air 1, it just really isn't that great of a performing device anymore. And that's kind of the problem. So once again, I would hate to go ahead and recommend a phone to people if it's already going to be kind of outdated. And that is essentially what's going to end up happening with this particular device. It's already an outdated iPad. And once again, I don't really want to recommend people to buy an outdated device from that perspective, but that's kind of what's happening when you're buying this type of device. So that in of itself is another very, very big thing to keep in mind. The battery life on this iPad though was one of probably the better things. An 8600 mAh battery. That's a very good sized battery to have inside of this thing. It's very big. And I think most iPads still are roughly around this type of battery size as well. So that in and of itself is a very good sized battery to pay for this, or to have on this particular iPad, which kind of makes it feel like a little bit of a better deal when you're buying it. But I will tell you, in my opinion, this particular iPad just really isn't worth buying anymore in any capacity at all. It just really isn't worth buying, and I don't really think it's probably worth it for anybody to go and pick up this type of iPad. I think you are much better off purchasing an iPad that is still supported with software. So think of an iPad like an iPad 7, iPad 8, iPad 9, or above. Any of the iPad Pros that are still supported, like an iPad Air 4, iPad Air 5, those ones are still good. And this one just really isn't worth buying, and I just wouldn't recommend any single person to go and buy this iPad anymore. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.